1978. A small town was shaken by a series of horrific murders that made the local residents afraid to leave their homes. That evening, John was sitting in his living room, waiting for his wife, Mandy. Mandy worked at a local cafeteria and usually finished work late. She was supposed to be home an hour ago, but she was running late. Finally, the door opened. Mandy appeared before John, covered in blood and wounds. Her head was bleeding, her clothes were torn, and her face was filled with terror. She was clutching her chest with her hand. Mandy was scared and hysterical. John gently pulled her hand away from her chest and saw a bloody bite mark on her skin. The bite belonged to a human. Furious, John rushed out into the street. He didn't know who he was looking for. He just wanted to tear apart the beast that had attacked his wife. In that moment, he didn't realize that any criminal always hides after committing a crime. Only the police could catch the culprit. The next morning, after calming down, Mandy and John went to the police. Mandy told the detectives that a madman had attacked her. He grabbed her by the hair and slammed her head against his knee. Blood flowed after he struck her face. Mandy felt nothing but pain and paralyzing fear. The madman raped her and, in his frenzy, bit her on the chest. After he calmed down, he suddenly asked politely, "Will you give me a ring?" She was ready to give him anything just to make the nightmare end. Mandy spent almost an hour with the attacker, but she couldn't remember his face at all. The shock had erased the details from her memory. She couldn't even describe the color of his hair. The detectives knew it would be difficult to find the criminal. After the attack on Mandy, the police increased patrols in the neighborhood. And it worked. One night, the police heard a terrifying scream for help. They ran toward the sound. A frightened woman burst out of the nearby bushes. She explained that she was walking home when someone grabbed her from behind and dragged her into the bushes. She screamed, but they covered her mouth with a hand. In desperation, she bit the attacker's finger, and the criminal fled. The police scoured the area, but found no one suspicious. The police had only one clue: the bitten finger of the maniac. But the next morning, everything changed. The woman came to the police and asked them to close the case. She didn't want anyone to know about the incident. The detectives realized the woman was hiding something and decided to question her further. One detective went to the woman's home. During the conversation, her husband suddenly arrived. His finger was bandaged. The detective realized that the woman's husband was the one who had attacked her that night. The woman understood that their secret was out. She had to confess everything. The couple enjoyed role-playing games, and the husband had decided to spice up their personal life this way. However, his wife took it seriously and genuinely thought she had been attacked by a maniac. The police closed the case. But the search for the real maniac continued. One evening, the criminal struck again, this time targeting a woman named Carol. She worked as a nurse and was returning home late from work. The walk from the metro station to her home wasn't far, and she was almost there. Suddenly, someone approached her and immediately punched her in the face. The monster tore open her coat and bit into her chest. Carol screamed in pain. She began to say her goodbyes to life. But suddenly, two men ran to her aid. They shouted and scared the maniac away. He quickly fled. The men who saved Carol called 911. It turned out that poor Carol had lost teeth, suffered a concussion, and was in severe shock. She couldn't describe the attacker either. Only one of the men said he noticed that the maniac had a beard. This was an important detail that would later help the detectives find the criminal. 2 weeks later, there was another attack, but this time on a different woman. Nick Delson reported his wife, Karen, missing. She was a teacher and hadn't returned home that evening. At first, Nick searched for his wife himself. Then he decided to ask for help. Neighbors, friends, the police, and concerned community members joined the search for Karen. They searched parks, forests, and checked any suspicious places and basements. Suddenly, someone spotted something bright in the distance. Everyone ran toward it. They found scattered books and notebooks. Nearby was a bra, and further on, under a tree, lay a lifeless body with a noose around its neck. The body was so battered and bruised it was barely recognizable. The face was swollen. Forensics examined the body. They found human bite marks on the victim's chest. There were also signs of rape. Nick Delson was in a state of shock. He refused to look at the body, insisting it wasn't his wife. He couldn't accept the horrifying reality. The police noticed drops of blood leading along a path and sent a dog to follow the trail. The trail led to a house. With the only clue that the criminal might have a beard, the detectives began looking for all the men who lived on that street. A neighbor remembered that a local drifter lived nearby. He worked as a janitor and kept the neighborhood streets clean. The detectives immediately went to his workplace. There was no one there, but they found a woman's purse. Nick identified it as his wife's. Soon they found another clue, a pair of gold earrings that Nick said his wife, Karen, used to wear, and a ring that the attacker had taken from his first victim. No one knew at the time that the strange janitor had learned to steal from dying people since he was a child. The detectives gathered enough evidence to arrest the strange janitor. The police went to his home. However, his wife informed them that he had gone to visit her mother, Olive. At that time, no one knew that the drifter was planning to attack this poor woman as well. The janitor's name was Peter. He arrived at Mrs. Olive's house, and they had a pleasant conversation. Evening came, and Peter asked to stay overnight, claiming he wasn't feeling well. When Olive had fallen asleep, Peter went to her bedroom and attacked the poor woman. He pinned her down, bit her on the chest, raped her, and beat her. Olive, terrified, battered, and on the verge of madness, lay still, too scared to move. After everything Peter did, he simply apologized and said it was a terrible mistake. Peter didn't know that the police were already on their way, but they were too late. By the time they rushed into the house, the criminal had already fled. The detectives thought Peter would go into hiding for a long time. However, Peter simply went home to his wife. That's where he was arrested. Peter calmly accepted his arrest, believing that there was no evidence against him. But the detectives presented the victim's jewelry as evidence. This shocked Peter. He turned pale and even lost his breath for a moment. It turned out that the reasons for such brutal behavior stemmed from his childhood. Peter didn't become a maniac overnight. He had been cruel and twisted since childhood, following the example set by his own father. Since then, Peter decided that when he grew up, he wouldn't drink as much. He realized early on that he enjoyed tormenting people. His first victim was a caretaker at an orphanage. He ended up there after his mother died. He was only 14 at the time. That day, he noticed the caretaker was drunk. The woman was deeply upset by her husband's infidelity. She was sent home, and she stumbled along the way. Peter, feeling his heart pounding, followed her. Near some bushes, he pounced on her and punched her in the face. The woman didn't even understand what was happening. She didn't realize she had been raped. So, the first attack easily slipped through the cracks, and Peter became convinced it was much easier to take women by force. Even if they died, it didn't matter. After the orphanage, he got caught stealing and was sent to prison for a few years. He was released, got married, and tried to live a normal life for a while. But at the age of 33, Peter suddenly snapped and began attacking again. He went to trial. Among themselves, the detectives nicknamed the maniac Jaws, and were sure that this beast would meet his end. But the judges thought otherwise. Peter was sentenced to 20 years in prison,